Hey friends, welcome to the Rhythms for Life podcast, where each week we talk about rhythms for building resilience so you can take charge of your mental, spiritual, and relational health.
These ideas come from Rebekah's best-selling book, Building a Resilient Life, How Adversity Awakens Strength, Hope, and Meaning. So grab your copy, invite your friends, and let's build resilience together.
Welcome back. I'm Rebekah.
And I'm Gabe.
It's May, babe.
It is May, and
we
had a great celebration of your birthday.
Yes.
Just this weekend, and Mother's Day, and all the things. Kids are home from college.
Cheers to all the mamas out there. I hope you felt so loved and celebrated.
Being a mom is a lot. It's a lot of work.
You're acting like you know, like you.
No, I watch it, and then I sometimes, every now and then I call myself a DD, a domestic dad. Because I do laundry and dishes and make beds and anything I can to help out, because it's part of just being a parent, not just a father or a mother.
Play this episode for all your hubbies.
Yeah. I'm amazed at the number of people or guys. I mean, I think some of it obviously was cultural, but just didn't grow up doing some of these things or knowing how to, or their wives didn't invite them into the process early in their marriage like you did.
Invite.
Yeah.
Sounds so inviting.
But anyway, this is another podcast
we'll
episode
have a
to get into that.
Side combo for that one.
But today we're talking about free to be brave and free to love. And so in a moment, we'll talk a little bit more about where that's going. But we're just coming off of also a wonderful retreat. We had our marriage and parenting retreat last week. We had with us Sissy Goff. We had Justin Whitmill Early with us. We also got to hear from Emerson Eggerichs. And more than anything, it was these 50 couples just together in the room, learning from one another, building new friendships, getting to ask their questions to these experts. And that's what Rebekah and I love about these retreats, is getting to meet you, but also getting to equip you to go back more confident, more clear about
connected.
The opportunity we all have to create healthier homes, families, and relationships.
Yeah, as you know, retreats have just kind of come from this community, this Rhythms for Life podcast community. And so we offer them once or twice a year. This year, we happen to be doing them twice. So we just had ours in May for marriage and parenting. And then we are also announcing today our emotional health retreat this November, our 5th annual emotional health retreat. And this is one of our favorites because you guys know who the speakers are. You're familiar with their voices, their faces on the podcast. We've got Dr. Chip Dodd and Dr. Kurt Thompson and more guests to come. And the dates are
November 21 and 22. It's the Thursday and Friday before the Thanksgiving week comes up. And so it's a fun time, a festive time to be in Franklin.
Yes, everything's decorated for Christmas. So you can just kickstart the holiday season and walk Main Street, do some shopping, enjoy all the fun things that come with the holidays.
So go to RebekahAlliance.com/retreat, learn about that, start making plans, and come join us. Now, Rebekah, we celebrated your 50th birthday this weekend.
We did.
Which was amazing.
You did amazing. You were the rock star husband celebrating me.
Well,
thank you.
You only get one time to celebrate you being 50.
That's true.
Just like we only have one time to ask you to marry me. And I try to do my best work.
You got to go all in.
But it was so cool to see these women honor you, so many of your friends locally, and just the impact you've had on so many lives. And I know on our listeners who also have been sending you DMs and emailing us and cards. Yeah.
So sweet. So sweet. Thank you. I feel very loved and overwhelmed with just gratitude, honestly, and more expectant at 50 than I was at 25, which is hard to even imagine. But I think it's just because we love the work we get to do. It feels life-giving, and as a result, I don't feel older. I may look older, but I don't feel older.
You don't look older.
Well, I do.
You look great.
If you look up close, yeah, I do, a little bit.
So as we move into this episode, we are talking about being free, and the entire series of being free. You couldn't imagine this many topics that deal with freedom, but they do. And you're going to hear today our conversation around the need to be brave, and what does it look like to have the freedom to have courage and to live out bravery in every area of our life, but also the freedom to love. And I would say, Rebekah, this weekend was a great example of what it looks like, the way you've loved other people, but also people loving you. And that comes from this sense of identity that's core and confident, that gives us this ability to love. And so let's listen in now to our conversation around how you can experience that freedom. Well, this week we are talking about two of, I think, some of the most encouraging moments in your book that you wrote, You Are Free. And it's about being brave and it's about love. And these two things work in tandem. They work together. I know for me in my life, I've been able to be way more brave when I feel loved, right? And when we're missing love or we're feeling some absence of care and concern for ourselves from other people, we sort of shrink back from the biggest things God might have for us in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about being a child, I think a lot of kids haven't learned how to be afraid yet. And yet when I wrote this chapter, I remember the first moment I really felt afraid. And I talk about it in this chapter, Free to be Brave, and it's the high dive at our community pool. And I don't know why, but
forever high dive
that
as a
high
kid.
dive, man, I feel like it's a metaphor for childhood of like overcoming the giant, right? It's nothing like a community pool high dive, which I think felt like 12 feet in the air, probably only 10 feet. But then you add however tall I was on top of that, with my eyes looking down. And I would climb up that thing and then climb back down. Talk about humiliating. And then climb back up like the next week and then climb back down.
In front of your friends.
Oh, and I took a diving class and I was supposed to do a back dive off the high dive. That was like the graduation to pass the class. And everyone would do it. And I would do the descent of shame and then do it again. Finally, I did it. It was like a free fall. You had to fall backwards with your arms over your head and do it perfectly so that you do like a pencil back dive off the high dive. I did it. But it was so terrifying. I don't think up until that point in childhood had I ever been literally shaking, like panicked shaking from something. And of course, it's like anything, which I'm not going to skydive. I have no plans of doing that in the near future. But it's like anything that's so terrifying that once you do it, you come up out of the water just literally exhilarated.
Yeah.
Like you're on fire. You cannot believe you finally tackled that giant.
I remember our son Pierce when we were down at one of those Orlando water parks, and it has this huge 150 tall water slide. He'd been watching it forever on YouTube.
Yes.
Could not wait. So excited. Loves those kind of things. And then we got up there. And when you're looking down, like you're actually having to face this fear because you're like, can I do this? Is this going to hurt? I mean, usually you're afraid.
Right.
And I remember a long processing of that talk. And what happened was we took Cade with us too. And Cade's always up for crazy stuff like that.
Crazy. He would just
and you would think he would process it and be so scared. And he's very cautious. But I remember Pierce watching Cade go out there, sit down. They're like, lay back on the thing. And Cade never lays back on these water slides. If you guys have ever done these water slides, you know, it's actually really dangerous not to lay back because that's what keeps you somewhat attached to the water and the slide.
Because you're vertical. I mean.
And Cade just sits up and literally just leans over and goes down the slide. And it threw him back. So he was forced to lay back.
Yeah.
And when Pierce saw that, he then had the courage to step forward. And I think that's what happens in life a lot is we need other people to help us feel courage.
Yeah.
You know, you've talked before about the definition of encouragement is to put courage in. And when we talk about being brave, brave's a hard thing to do by yourself.
Yeah.
And you need other people around you to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That positive peer pressure is no joke, especially as a kid, because you're like, if they can do it, surely I can at least try, you know? And that was so encouraging. And then the next thing we talk about in that chapter is public speaking. I mean, these are all things that are common fears for the majority of the U.S. population. I mean, it's just getting up in front of people and hoping that you'll actually have something to say.
Yeah.
Like the worst dream in the world is that you're like on a stage naked, like meaning metaphorically, hopefully, but you just don't have anything.
Yeah.
And so I talk about that in the chapter as well of leaving my laptop in the seat in front of me and missing and running to my connecting flight and losing my laptop with Delta Forever and having no notes for that weekend where I had prepped for 3 45-minute keynotes.
Yeah.
God was like, okay, it's in you. You're going to go rogue. And that did really, truly shift how I communicate publicly now. I have a loose outline, but now I'm a lot more confident in knowing if I go off script, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, you talk about in this book, on page 199, bravery is moving scared. Bravery requires stepping out. And I love that definition that it's moving scared. It's like when you're brave, the point of being brave is it's not that you feel confident that you know the outcome, or
Right.
that this is gonna work out the way you hoped. It's that I'm gonna still take action even when I'm
Yeah.
not certain of the outcome.
What does that look like for you, Gabe? Like where you're just like terrified? Because you are so cool and calm and collected, and you seem fairly chill in most things you do.
Yeah.
But like,
I'm
can you
pretty
remember
chill.
a moment that you're just like, I'm just going to move into this, but I don't want to overthink it because it's really scary to think about?
Well, my biggest moment, it's another, I mean, I feel like everything we're talking about is falling from heights. Like, and obviously bravery's more than that. So let me tell this
It's a
story,
free
but then
fall.
we'll move. But I remember skydiving, and
Yes.
you were with me then. We were dating in college, and again, only possible because I had two other guys going with me that
Yeah.
were my friends. But I was scared to death. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
journaling all the way to the skydive airport location, thinking like, this is probably the last thing I'm ever going to write. Or maybe like I could die. Like I think anybody skydiving has
Yeah.
to deal with the fact that this could
Stare
not,
death in the face.
this may not end well. And I remember writing like in my journal all these thoughts, and just that was constant. That fear of death, was there. And sometimes that fear keeps a lot of us from doing things that are so exhilarating.
Right.
That on the other side of it, as you expressed.
So what did you feel the moment like it was time for your turn?
Yeah, so
Did
I went
somebody go
first.
before? Oh,
No,
you went
I
first?
was first, and the beauty of skydiving when you're not experienced is you have somebody on your back, so you're
Yeah.
tandem, and so that gave me the confidence because
Yeah.
this guy had done it over 1,000 times. I mean,
Yeah.
so this is somebody who I could trust, and I think when I did it, as soon as we were out of the plane, I loved it.
Yeah.
And there was no fear. I was just
Right.
enjoying it, and once we landed, we were like, "Let's go do it again." I
Yeah.
mean, immediately like,
Yeah.
I got this.
Adrenaline, and you just fall forward, right?
Yeah.
Like you just kind of cartwheel into the air.
Right.
You're not
Yeah.
even really
Yeah.
seeing the ground at that point.
No, it just feels you kind of think your stomach's going to go up into your into your neck, and it's going to feel weird like a roller coaster, but it doesn't, because you actually have nothing to compare around you that you're falling. I mean, you just all you
So
feel is
wow.
120 miles an hour of wind. For those of you that have done it, now our son wants to do it, and I'm finding myself like going, I don't know if I really want to try this again.
I know.
But I think here's the big idea. I think is bravery in moving scared is also bravery is moving with others. And I think in this journey of being free, it's one thing to have freedom yourself and to feel that freedom, but to start thinking about, well, what does it mean to me to both help other people feel that freedom, and then who are the people around me that maybe need some courage, and maybe I'm in their life as a friend, as a parent, as a colleague, that me just speaking some words of encouragement to them will put the courage in them to take the action they need to take even when they're scared.
And the only way to grow in that courage or that bravery, like we've talked about even in the Resilient book, to grow in resilience, is you have to do these moderate, predictable, controllable actions every day that activate your stress response. Like something that's just a little outside of your comfort zone that does make you a little like, oh, wow, we're doing this, and when you do that over time, over and over and over again, you're no longer terrified of something. It just becomes another resilience building exercise. So for you and I, great example would be if I were to go off the diving board, for years after that, I would do flips off, back flips off. Like you've done it enough that it no longer is terrifying. And it wasn't like, oh, I took the mountain. No, you just got used to it. Or speaking on a stage, I don't get anxious or afraid anymore. It still activates my stress response enough to be like, oh, I need to know what I'm talking about in general. But the more we practice those things that push us just enough beyond our normal baseline level of comfort, those are the ways that we become more brave.
Yeah. And I also think that we can have more bravery when there's a confidence that's built that we somewhat can trust in the outcome.
Yeah.
And in life and in jumping, and you do kind of do that. You're like, well, this person did it. Cade did it. Pierce can do it. Or this guy's done it 1,000 times out of an airplane. I can do it. I think as it relates to in my walk with God, in our relationship with God, like this cultural moment is going to require some bravery and courage to sometimes say things that are countercultural, to live in such a way that looks different than maybe how someone else is, and they don't understand it. And I kind of come back to Scripture. I come back to the Word of God. I come back to like there's such a trustworthy way in which we can put our trust in God, that the way He's instructed us to live, what biblical godly wisdom is in this world, may feel like it's being brave to live it out
Mm.
because it's countercultural
Mhm.
or it's uncomfortable or it's not understood by our friends,
Yeah.
and choices that we might make. And that kind of courage to those listening, I just want to encourage you, like, you can be brave because you can actually trust the outcome. Like, you're not stepping into some unknown. Like, God's given us such a blueprint of how to live, of what
Yeah.
it means to live wisely, what it means to have a flourishing life. And that should give us all more courage to be brave, to live out our lives in such ways that even when others don't understand it, we can still move scared of opinion, or
Yeah.
not worry about the fear of man and whether they understand the choices that we're making with our family, with our kids, with our lifestyle, whatever it might be. And so I just think I want to share that with you guys, because I think we're going to need some bravery, and you're going to have to feel that freedom and confidence to be brave in a world that might misunderstand you.
Yeah. I think about today as we're recording, it marks 6 years since my dad passed away. And the few days before that, we were with him and I was reading scripture to him and reminding him while you were holding his hand of how the Holy Spirit was with him and had made his home in Dad and given him the grace and the peace for all of that. And I remember at his funeral, like, we sang with him in the room, "Great is Thy Faithfulness." I got the hymnal
Mm.
that he had by his bedside that was from our old church growing up, where he would always sing with me the harmonies that I would sing with him. And so I'll play "Great is Thy Faithfulness" and always think of my dad. And I think, honestly, that song of "Great is Your Faithfulness" has grown my courage and my bravery, because when I enter new journeys or new seasons that feel looming or stretching and could potentially feel hard or overwhelming, I'm reminded of all the ways God has been faithful. Every other time I've been afraid. Every other time we've risked and taken a leap of faith, literally. And whether that's been venturing out with, a new vocational work, or launching something that wasn't there before, or having children. I mean, all of you guys who are listening, you do brave things every day. And you might not even be so conscious of how strong you are or how brave you've become, because it has become God's faithfulness who's sustained you so that you can continue to trust him. You can look back on all those seasons of your life where he showed up when you were afraid, and he walked you through, he took you by the hand, or he carried you through that season of really hard, painful things. And his faithfulness is what keeps you being courageous.
Yeah, that's good. And the enemy of brave is fear. And
Yeah.
that's where this chapter concludes. There's some great questions that I just want to pose as you're listening right now, to identify in your life an area or two of your life in which there's fear. Because this will be a signal for everybody, right? Like, what am I afraid of? Because that's going to tell you this is where I probably need to be brave. Are there ways you could engage your fear in baby steps, little by little, day by day? So list out some ways you'd like to approach transforming your fear into freedom.
Yeah.
And so I'd encourage each of you to take a moment to do that. You can do that throughout this book. This is the wonderful thing about this book, You Are Free, is every single one of these ideas we're discussing does have good reflective questions, and there's even some space on these pages to write your thoughts, write your notes, consider where does God want to bring you more freedom? Which brings us to the next idea here about freedom, which is free to love. And you have this wonderful quote that hangs on the wall of our living room.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to read it. It's by Mother Teresa. It says, "If you want to bring happiness to the whole world, go home and love your family."
Yeah.
Why does that mean so much to you?
Yeah, it's kind of the hidden places, I think, have to be pure so that you can go back out or minister from a place of wholeness and healing. And I think the temptation for people who might have a ministry that looks sometimes public, or you have to show up somewhere and serve in a way that's visible, the Lord really looks at the heart. And I remember that, putting that quote on the wall when I had probably been working and teaching and traveling for about 3 years up to that point, and felt like I was missing out on the richness at home, because I was almost like in two places
Yeah.
at the same time. My heart was almost fractured in some ways, trying to do all things well. And I noticed it in my mothering, most importantly, but I did notice it with you and I as well. It was just like there's a distance that can creep in when you're in this pace of travel and you don't have a real strong tether at home. So it was the Lord just kind of reminding me front and center, hang this on your wall. You can't miss it. Yes, I'm still sending you, but no, you come home with some sense of urgency
Yeah.
because you just don't want to miss the intimacy and the nearness and the knowing and being known
Yeah.
that only really begins at home.
Well, it's so cool going back when you wrote this book and now seeing how much life's shifted and how much intention you had to take after those first few years of saying, I'm going to restructure my life, my rhythm, how I do this, how we ended up adopting joy out of that process because we created, I feel like, more margin. But when we think about Free to Love, I mean, the story, and this is one of the stories in this book. We talk about our story of dating, falling in love, of you having some feelings of like, were you worthy of love?
Right.
Talk a little bit about that feeling that maybe people listening right now, they still feel that.
Yeah, I remember when we began dating and all my relationships prior to meeting you, I would eventually end. And it was partly out of just this fear of not fully knowing how to give my whole heart to someone. I always kind of had a part of it that was guarded. And looking back now, and I talk about this in this book, that I somehow adopted the lie that I'm not worthy of love unless I earn it. And it was not anything that was ever spoken over me. I think it was just the air that I breathed, the currency of connection growing up. It was kind of just...
And performance was a big part of how you felt loved.
And so again, we talk about this in the book where God just said, stop performing for love. And so all these things are coming out in this book, You Are Free. But most importantly, if I thought I had to earn love, then I was scared of a love that was unconditional. And I noticed with Gabe that he was starting to move towards me with a love that was unconditional. And I felt very uncomfortable with that because I was like, what if I don't show up one day? What if I'm not enough for you? What if I don't present myself in this perfect way? I can't understand what it would mean to be that vulnerable to someone and feel like I don't have something to offer and I'd really be truly just one who receives.
Yeah.
That was hard. I just realized, oh, wow, the fierce independence in this firstborn is now being met with my match in you. And I just remember you telling me how much you loved me. And while I loved you too, it freaked me out because I was like, he might be the guy. Like, this might be it. And I just remember saying, I don't know how to love.
Well, and I remember God giving me just this insight, understanding just kind of how you had experienced these past moments where you'd been confronted with love and didn't quite know what to do. And there was just a compassion and sensitivity where I just felt like, well, that's part of why I'm in your life. Like, I'm going to be patient. Like, let's walk through this together. I'll show you what I know about love and we'll learn to love each other together. And anyway, that began this wonderful journey. And we tell the story of our engagement in this chapter, which is so funny. This last weekend, we had Pierce home from college and his girlfriend, and we were pulling out the old home videos, and all they wanted to do was watch the videos of
I was like, are you sure?
This engagement moment in 1997, old school video VHS camera capturing it. We had a great friend come with us, and it's this story. You do have to read it, but the story was a fun one because I got to plan this engagement based around Rebekah's dream date when she was a little girl, which was to go to New York City and go to Phantom of the Opera in a red dress. That was the premise. And so I knew that little nugget. And this is to encourage all you other parents out there listening, other people, tell the boys in your world, your sons, to try to understand the unique little dreams in their girlfriend's heart or the things that they might long for, because that became the inspiration to then create this whole engagement story around New York City. It was a surprise. It was so much fun.
It was magic. I mean, it was just beautiful. Obviously, you worked very hard for it to happen. I thought I was surprising you, and yet you had the whole thing planned behind my back. And it was September 19th of 1997. We got married 3 months to the day later because we had been living long distance and we were just ready to be together and didn't want to have to go through the roommate situation and start another 1-year lease. So everything was accelerated in that year. But it was, again, this beautiful thing because that moment happened about 1.5 years after we had that conversation. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to be this vulnerable in a relationship. And even later in the chapter, we talk about sometimes it takes a while to unlearn some things. And I remember us going to counseling probably around 10 years in. where if you would have something to say that might be in the slightest feel confrontive or corrective to me, I would retreat and shut down and take it as a full-blown rejection. And so we went and met with a counselor in that season, and I always felt this overwhelming shame. Like if I wasn't doing it perfectly and you weren't just elated with, all the things I was trying to do as a wife, then I was failing. And so I had to really unpack, like, why was there shame? Why did I take it so personally? Why was this failure so intimidating to me? And this love piece was more, I knew at that point, I was like, wow, I need to know why I run and hide. And I've talked about this since on the podcast from, what I've learned through the Soul of Shame and the Resilient Life book about understanding the weight of shame. And the older we get and through the decades, we unpack more layers of healing, but how kind of God, even in that first decade of marriage, to go, hey, this isn't a rejection of Gabe. He just needs to feel like he can talk to you about things that are hard without you feeling condemned.
Yeah. And this idea of being free to love, when you feel loved, you are then free to love not just yourself, but to love others really, really well. And I think each of us need help in that. I mean, there's even if you grew up in a home that was loving, you felt loved, as life goes on and you walk through trauma, you walk through different areas that break you, there is that question that seems to linger in most of our minds. Am I really that lovable? Am I that special? Am I deserving of love? And that's the beauty of God's love for us, is like we actually don't deserve it, but we can fully embrace it and experience it. And when we do, the grace that brings hopefully allows us to extend that grace to other people. And that's what unconditional love is, right? There's no condition. There's nothing you have to do for my love.
Yeah.
And even no matter what you do, I'm going to still love you. I mean, that kind of commitment.
Yeah.
I'd say, it's hard, but even in marriages today, like not everybody's feeling that committed, right? There seems to some ways be a more kind of excuses for abandoning love versus sticking in with unconditional love when the hardest moments come. And I think we've walked through those really tough moments, and we're not above making the wrong call there or the wrong choice, but it's only by God's grace, I think, that we're able to keep coming back to choosing to love.
Yeah, and I think if love is a choice, like we are describing, then it's not just a choice to say I love you and I'm going to stick around. Yes, we love that covenant and commitment, but more importantly even than that is, are we going to lean into the healing that might be obstructing or preventing love, whether it's receiving it or extending it? And usually that goes back to some form of a story of origin, not to blame anyone else, but just that if it was currency for me in my upbringing, that performance was attached to love, then it's going to be normal for a marriage to feel like that as well. It's just what you know, and your brain has carved that neural pathway, and that's kind of your automatic default. But through help and support and counsel and, just these harder conversations that sometimes feel like conflict in love. And you're like, wait, there's not conflict in love. Well, actually, conflict just shows that you both care and that you really want to seek to understand one another, even if it's coming out sideways, that you're still at least leaning in and going, where am I getting this wrong? I seem to keep getting this wrong and I don't want to. How does this make you feel? How does it make me feel? Like just trying so hard, even in the process of learning how to love and receive love, to ask questions, to be curious about what are the barriers or the obstacles or the defaults that make us want to run and hide. Because the opposite of love is abandonment, right? Just to reject and walk away. And part of it is going, okay, God, show me in the middle of it while it's very uncomfortable. And I feel like I'm, a fish out of water, completely unaware of what's happening. I want your Holy Spirit to give me wisdom on how to navigate this. And you and I are still doing this 26 years in. Show me, God, how I responded, why I responded that way, what was beneath that, and what do we need to talk about as a result so that we can repair.
Yeah. And I think the way you conclude this particular chapter is you also pose the question back to the person that's not feeling loved. Is there a way that I'm being resistant to love?
Yeah.
And the question here is, do you push back against the love your spouse, your friends, your children, or God is trying to provide, and why? Those are those deeper questions. Like maybe there are people around you trying to express love and you just can't receive it. And it's a healing that you need to feel freedom in to even receive love.
Well, and it's usually goes again back to where and when did those walls go up? What were the circumstances? What was the story where you just all of a sudden had to preserve and defend and deflect?
Yeah.
And as we understand, a lot of our inability to receive or give love comes from some form of rejection in our past, some form of judgment or pushing away or diminishment. So it doesn't mean that's the end of the story. That doesn't mean that we, condemn whoever's face we attach to that. But what we can do is at least acknowledge it and understand it better. They go, oh, when you say this, it triggers this in me because it reminds me of a season where I felt very alone. So just by even having vocabulary for that, I think helps so much in going, this is less about the moment of the conflict that we're having or my inability to receive your love. It's helping me connect the dots that this began a long time ago. And in acknowledging that and being vulnerable with it, I'm able to begin to heal with you in it.
Yeah. And the connection here is when you feel loved, you feel brave because you know that there's no conditions that are being set for you to experience that love, and that whether you fail in your bravery, like walking forward in fear to attempt something new, to try that new idea that maybe has been in front of you, or to confront something old that's just lingering, that's going to take some courage. When you feel loved and when you're giving love to your spouse, to your family, to your kids, they start to step up into the things God has for them. And so these two are uniquely connected. And so it's been great chatting with you about these. I'd encourage all of you to continue reading through You Are Free. We have one more chapter to go, and we're going to be talking about that in our next episode, and also taking your questions that you've been asking us throughout this series and responding to some of those ideas about how do we live this out and how do we as a community continue to be free. I hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation and continue to invite people in. I know we're getting towards the end of this series on being free and all the ways to do it, but it's such a great way this summer as you're kicking it off with your family, with your kids, as you're doing discipleship with them, and you want to go deeper into their identity. It's such an important area for all of us to be developing and discipling people in. This is an incredible series to do it, but also Rebekah's book, You Are Free. You can get the paperback version, and you can come along with us on a journey this summer of continuing to listen to these episodes and have conversations that really lead to wisdom.